Ghost Operative audio files, first contact. The funeral was at 2 o'clock. I was ready by 1. I'd even put on a suitable dress for it, not that he'd know. I picked up my keys, but as I looked at the door I put them back down. Fuck this. I'm not going to stand at a graveside, grieve an empty coffin and pretend otherwise. Lucas Redmond isn't dead. That's not grief talking. That's 6 months of evidence. There's a word for what it's called when you know the person supposedly in the box isn't actually dead. I don't know what it is. Waste of time covers it. They were all there. David, Julie, even Natasha. Every one of them standing at a graveside for a man they'd given up on. None of them had believed me. 6 months of telling anyone who would listen, and not one of them had listened. Lucas didn't die in that explosion. He ran. I've had 6 months to think about why. I think I know the answer. I'm just not ready to write it down yet. By 3 o'clock they'd lowered the empty box. I wouldn't be there. I turned from the door and went back to my screens. The RISLA papers were waiting on the desk, next to them the old tin. Inside the usual paraphernalia and the Zippo that used to belong to my brother Nikos. The Greek letter Omega was engraved on the casing. I used to rub it when I needed steadying. I needed it a lot lately. I flicked the lighter open, lit the joint, took a long drag and pulled up the search. I'm going to find you, you big lump. Screens glowed cold on the 10th floor layer, OLEDs feeding the false river views while the real Thames lapped outside. The night came all too quickly as it had day after day, month after month. 6 months of dead-end scrolls passed in compressed logs, Tor circuits bounced through exit nodes, onion services crawled and abandoned, every lead ghosted or burned. His known allies were the first thing I tried. Sebastian Jericho, Michael Cartwright, Dominic Howe, Matthew Briggs, Alec Graves. I hadn't expected to find anything, but the search had to be methodical. Encrypted contacts next. Dead drop signals, threads routed through ephemeral bridges, PGP keys rotated weekly, no persistent metadata. Then the dark web channels, private.onion forums, investigation-only dread mirrors, the pay sites where arms network favours traded like currency. I pulled in markers from half a dozen initial access brokers, swapping UAV schematics and suppressed Glock parts for scraps of chatter. Nothing stuck. I hadn't expected it to. Lucas hadn't survived 20 years in the field by leaving threads to pull, but you don't stop pulling. Biometric databases I had no business touching came next, including this. Lucas's military record is the most redacted document I've ever seen, and I've seen some spectacularly redacted documents. 14 operations reduced to black bars and partial dates. The one that wasn't fully buried was Nightfall, Syria, 2016. The debrief officer's name was clearly visible, Lieutenant Cole D. Cavendish. I sat with that for a moment. Foreign Secretary Cavendish. The man who sealed the Nightfall files was now the second most powerful person in the British government. I noted it, filed it, added it to a very long list of questions I intended to put to that big lump when I found him. Scraped facial recognition next. Hits from leaked UK border force dumps, iris pattern cross-reference against spoofed NHS records, gate analysis pulled from traffic cam archives via credential-stuffed admin panels. I ran fuzzy hash matches on partial prints, voice print fragments from burner calls, even synthetic DNA markers floating on underground biobrokers. Every vector dead-ended in scrub logs or agency honeypots that smelled like traps from a mile away. I widened the geographical search. More queries spinning in the background, custom scrapers probing arms trafficking telegram channels, blockchain traces on burner wallets linked to the explosion's aftermath. I widened the geographical search. More queries spinning in the background, custom scrapers probing arms trafficking telegram channels, blockchain traces or burner wallets linked to the explosion's aftermath, SIGINT snippets harvested from compressed IMSI catchers, 6 months, thousands of hours, zero closure. A week before everything changed, I'd been close. A signal thread from a contact in Istanbul who claimed to have seen a man matching Lucas's description moving through the Bosphorus corridor. I spent 4 days running it down, burned 2 favours and 3 proxy chains trying to get the source. It was nothing, a misidentification, wrong height, wrong build, wrong everything. I sat at these screens for 20 minutes afterwards without moving, just looking at the empty search field. Then I'd opened a new query and started again. Everything came back empty. Not suspicious empty, not cover your tracks empty, just nothing. Like he'd stepped off the edge of the world and the world had closed over the gap. I knew better than that. The Mavic went up at midnight. A client wanted proof of the infrared package before transfer. The infrared package performed exactly as advertised. Heat signatures from the riverbank, a fox moving through the scrubland on the far bank, the engine block of a petrol boat called in 200 metres downstream. I recorded 4 minutes of footage, time-stamped and encrypted, ready for the client. I took the opportunity to check my parameter while I had eyes in the air. Old habit, the kind that keeps you alive and predators away. 3 circuits of Millennium Mills. No vehicle surveillance on any of the approach roads. No static observation points in the derelict buildings to the east. No boats holding positions on the river. Clean, as it always was. The Thames was black and cold below. Millennium Mills sat dark and silent on the bank. Nobody watching. Nobody ever watched. What was the point of the place? I brought the Maverick in through the 10th floor window, set it on the charging dock and returned to the search. Then, 6 weeks into the thread I'd almost abandoned, something came back. A biometric query I feeded into 3 separate jurisdictions, a UK Border Force dark archive, a leaked Interpol facial recognition batch, and a private contractor database I'd paid a former GCHQ analysis $40,000 in Monero to crack, returned a match. 94.7% confidence. The query had been running passively for 6 weeks, ticking over in the background while the active searches burned through my proxies. I hadn't expected it to return anything. I'd been doing this long enough to stop expecting things. The match had routed through 3 jurisdictions. Each one held a fragment, a partial facial geometry, a gate signature pulled from the camera feed, an iris pattern that was close but not conclusive on its own. Together, they crossed the threshold. 94.7% wasn't certainty, but it was the closest thing I'd seen in 6 months. I pulled the image. It loaded slowly, satellite uplink from the source database, 3 anonymous in layers between me and the server, each one adding latency. The progress bar moved in increments too small to track. Partial first, a corner of something, a wall, pale stone, tropical vegetation, blurred at the edges of the frame, then the figure, then the face. Blurred, the source image was low resolution, taken at distance, compressed for transmission. The facial geometry software had done what it could, but the result was smeared. Features present, but not resolved, like looking at someone through frosted glass. I leaned forward. I knew the height, I knew the build, I knew the way he stood, the specific stillness of someone who has already asserted every exit in the room before you've even noticed he's there. 20 years of muscle memory don't change. You can alter a face, change a name, burn every alias you've ever used. You can't change the way you occupy space. I stood next to this man in enough dangerous places to know exactly what he looked like when he thought nobody was watching. The set of his shoulders, the weight distribution, the slight turn of the head that meant he'd already clocked the camera before the camera clocked him. The face wouldn't resolve, but I didn't need it to. I stared at the image for a long time, long enough that the joint had gone out between my fingers without me noticing. I didn't celebrate, there was nothing to celebrate yet. A 94.7% match on a blurred image from a passive query wasn't Lucas, it was a thread. But I'd been pulling threads for 6 months. I knew what it felt like when they had something at the end of them. I put what was left of the joint down, opened a new document. I went back to the image, not the face, the background. The wall, pale stone, dense, irregular, not rendered concrete, not European brick, older. The kind of construction you find in colonial era buildings across Southeast Asia, Macau, Hong Kong, parts of Vietnam. The mortar lines were wide and hand-finished. The vegetation at the frame's edge, broadleaf, dense, the kind of canopy that closes over a road within the season if nobody cuts it back, subtropical, consistent with a latitude between 15 and 25 degrees north. The light, flat and diffuse, the sun high and slightly hazed. Not monsoon season, dry, February or March, somewhere in that band. I cross-referenced the gate signature location data buried within the biometric match. The camera that had called him was registered to a private security network. The network's IP range resolved to a hosting provider with servers in one city. Not a guess, a conclusion. I typed one word at the top of the document: Macau. I rolled another joint and then picked up Nikos's lighter, ran my thumb across the Omega symbol and got to work. Ghost Hunt, a free novel that follows Ellen's story, is available now. Find the link on Desmond G. Palmer YouTube channel page.